I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, your home for deer hunting news, stories, and strategies. And now, your host, Mark Kenyon.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kenyon, and this is episode number 325. And today, we're chatting late season deer hunting with Brett Joy, and we're talking big woods bucks and how to kill a buck in December. All right, welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, brought to you by Onyx. Today, as I just mentioned, we are focused on late season deer hunting. I've got a great guest for you today. This is Brett Joy. He's been on the show a couple times on Rut Fresh Radio, and several years ago came on to talk to us about his unique approach to hunting bucks in the Northeast. He hunts in New Hampshire and some other areas in the region, but has also traveled across the Midwest and West chasing whitetails all over the place. So he's got a very diverse set of experiences to pull from, and he gets the job done. He's killed a lot of really nice mature bucks, but he just recently killed an absolute unbelievable buck in December in the mountains of New Hampshire. Deep, deep snow, brutal conditions, and he got it done. I wanted to see what we could learn from this experience, what we could learn from that story that might help all of us with our own hunts here in the late season. So we're going to break down that story in detail, and then along the way, I'm going to kind of pick at him to try to learn some bigger, higher picture lessons. We're going to talk through ideas that can help you on public land. We're going to talk through ideas that can help you find deer in big wood situations. But we'll also look at different concepts and ideas that will apply to, ag land, how you might be able to have success in the late season, in the Midwest or the South or somewhere else too. So we cover a lot on the tactical side. And then also, and I found this particularly interesting, we spent some time talking about the mental side of hunting in the late season. Right? You've been hunting for months, possibly at this point. Maybe you haven't failed a tag yet. Things are getting a little bit glum. You're struggling, wondering, am I ever going to kill anything this year? Am I going to have an empty freezer this year? That can wear you down. That can leave you feeling a little bit rough. So we talk about how to deal with that, how to push on through those long, cold hunts and make it through the end of the season. So that is what we discussed today. It's a lot of fun. I enjoyed Brett's conversation and his story and his experience, and I think you will too. All right, back with me now for his second appearance on the regular Wired Hunt podcast, and now multiple times on Rut Radio. We've got Brett Joy. Thank you for joining me again, Brett.
Well, thanks for having me, Mark. I'm glad you had me back.
Well, you keep on putting big deer on the ground, and it keeps on catching my attention. So you're doing something right. I got to tell you, congratulations on this recent deer.
Thank you. Appreciate it. So it's actually been a little bit since I was connected with a big one. I've been after some, shot a pretty good deer in the past, and I'm kind of getting really picky and trying to hunt the oldest deer I can find. And when you do that, and you're after one or two, particular animals, it sometimes doesn't happen for every year, and it's you can eat a lot of tags, and that's kind of was the deal with this one. It's been, I think, since 2016 since I shot a buck, so 3 years coming.
Well, I can certainly relate to that whole transition to getting really picky and how that can lead to you not feeling tags. Because the last few years I've had some situations like that. Like this year, I've been after one deer in Michigan, and because of it, I've passed on more really nice Michigan bucks than I ever have. And I keep on bouncing back and forth with, am I crazy? Am I stupid? Or is this worth it?
Yeah. I think a lot of that comes from just the hunting, I guess, community. I'm kind of the same way. And if you're okay with eating a tag, which I think probably both of us are at this point, there's nothing wrong with it. And there's nothing wrong with not wanting to eat a tag as well. People are at different places and get different things out of it. And for some guys, they just start after a particular animal and they don't care if they eat a tag, and they're just doing what they're doing. And that's I think the unique and beautiful thing about what we're doing is everybody takes something different out of it, and it's in it for a different reason. And we should all encourage each other when we decide to shoot the first deer we see, or, we go 3 years waiting on, an 8-year-old buck. So,
yeah, very true. You got to hunt your own hunt. That's what I've been telling myself, and not worrying about what other people think or what other people's expectations are or anything like that. If it makes you happy and it's legal, do it.
Yep, absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
I'm hoping that I'm going to get some of this, I don't know what you'd call it, like a little bit of your good luck rubbing off on me, because you've been after one deer for a while and you got him finally. I've been after one deer for a while and I haven't got him yet. So if there's anything you can pass along, or if you can send the lucky pixie dust or something through the airwaves to help me do the same thing, I would appreciate that very much.
Well, it's funny you say that, because a week ago I would have been looking for the luck you had last year, because I haven't had much go right in the last 3 seasons until Saturday. So, that's how it is. You can have a hot streak and go in a tear, and it seems like you can't not shoot a big deer, and then it seems like you can't do anything right, even though you're doing all the things you usually do, and being disciplined and persistent, and just sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't. It's just, I think if it happened and it was predictable every time, then it wouldn't be as fun, or at least it's challenging, and it wouldn't have the same allure to me, at least. So
yeah, you wouldn't appreciate it as much. Yeah.
No, absolutely not.
So okay, we should just get into the story of this years-long journey. But I want to ask you to bear with me, because I want to hear your story. But I also think we can use this story as almost a template to talk about how to kill a good buck in December too, because you just killed an incredible deer in New Hampshire in a relatively unique situation compared to a lot of people, and you did it in December. So I want to hear the story. I want to hear from the very beginning, from years ago, how this progressed. And then throughout, though, I'll probably poke and prod you to then take a step back and talk about, okay, how would you approach this kind of late season hunt if you were in Ohio? Or how would you approach this if you were somewhere else? Or what other things should we think about during December? How would we scout in December? And we'll bounce back and forth between your specific story and high level advice, so that someone can listen to this and get some great late season help too. Are you game for that idea and that plan?
Yeah, sure. Sounds like a plan.
Cool. All right. Well, then take me back in time into New Hampshire. Where was this? 4 years ago, maybe, when the story started? How does the story start?
Yeah. So as I've gotten, I guess, deeper into, I guess you could say, my hunting career, and hunted more, I've begun to appreciate the challenge of hunting in the Northeast, and particularly New Hampshire. When I was younger, I was kind of bummed out about it, and I used to get really frustrated. And don't get me wrong, I've killed some nice bucks, but man, you just have to work so hard for them. And traveled to the Midwest a lot and had some good success, and kind of fell in love with that. But then I just really, as I got older, started to appreciate these older animals that are just so challenging to kill. So I've kind of, I guess you could say, reshifted my focus back to, my home state in New Hampshire and some of these older deer that are just such a challenge. And I really now enjoy that, I think, more than anything. People think I'm crazy, because a lot of the guys that are after big deer in this area will travel out of state to hunt. Not that they don't hunt locally, they do, but they take their rec vacation days and head to Illinois or Ohio or Iowa or wherever. And I've kind of took the opposite approach these last few years, and And with that, I've also tried to find some new areas to hunt and kind of stretch my legs a little bit. We have pretty much endless opportunity for hunting around here as far as, acreage and areas. Most of the land is open to public hunting for the most part. So kind of all started with me wanting to get away from other hunters a little more than I have been. And I do live in a pretty rural area with, I'd say, moderate hunting pressure. But I really like the feeling of being alone in the woods and knowing there's no one within a mile of me. Like, I really enjoy that, and being able to pursue a particular animal with, uninterrupted or getting messed up by anybody else. And I don't like sitting in a stand listening to a leaf blower or kids or dogs barking or the highway. So that's been kind of my focus. A few years back, I just said, I'm going to kind of look for some bigger areas of woods, public land, and, some mountainous stuff. I love the mountains, and we do have a fair amount of mountains, not like, Colorado or Rocky Mountains, but we do have some pretty good bumps out here in the east. So
yeah,
I started to do that, started to scout some new areas, and I found a few areas that looked really good, and started running some cameras, and found one particular area I was getting pictures of some good deer, and this deer was one of them.
Now, can I hit pause?
I don't know. Yep.
I want to hit pause a little bit, and we talked about this years ago when you were on the podcast for the first time.
Yep.
But just for people that haven't heard, can you just elaborate a little bit more on how you try to pick a spot like this, and how you're thinking about running those cameras to help you identify where a hot spot might be? Because when you're talking big swaths of public land, and this is big woods habitat mostly, right? It's kind of intimidating for a lot of people to try to break that down and pick an area to focus on. So what did your process look like?
Yeah, it's extremely intimidating, actually. You just got to dive into it. But I think I've kind of refined that process over the years, and where I'm at now is I look for, first, I try to get away from any population center. And this is not, everything I'm going to tell you is nothing that hasn't been said before by other guys, but I really try to get away from cities or bigger towns, because there's going to be more hunters in those areas, and the land adjacent to those particular population centers are going to get more pressure. So I look for areas that have low human density. Once I find that, then I'm looking for big tracts of timber that are relatively inaccessible unless you're willing to, take a boat or a canoe in a mile, or walk over mountains, or, do something of that nature. So I really like to be, I say, minimal a mile from a road. I prefer to be like two plus miles from a road, and I like to get high. So, a lot of this, I could say, base level, or most towns around here are between, I'd say, 500 and 1,000 feet. I like to be up, 1,500 to 2,000 feet in elevation. And once you get in that deep, away from a population center, and then you get up high, you start to lose a lot of the hunting pressure and the company, which is what I like. Once I have narrowed those particular areas down, and you may narrow that down, but you're still looking at 5,000 acres. I'm looking for really three things. I'm looking for any sort of early succession growth, areas with high stem count. Those areas have been selectively cut or logged, or clear cut even. Then I'm looking for swamps. Swamps always seem to have mature deer in and around them. And then the last thing I'm looking for is topography, like pinch points. And so during the summer, I'm going to look for really that early succession growth. So cuts, clear cuts, selective cuts, whatever is going to, have high quality forage for these bucks over the summer. I'll run cameras there and hopefully get a pretty good idea if there's anything in the area. And then, I'll start to transition those cameras to scrapes and, swamp edges and stuff like that. And then really, where I think you can really figure out what's going on in the area is during the rut. And then I'm going to run cameras on pinch points. And that's a lot of the time based on topography or edges that may be created by clear cut and mature timber swamp or vice versa. Any areas that are going to, concentrate deer activity. And anymore, I really like to almost run cameras a whole year in advance of when I plan to hunt a deer or an area. And I think you learn so much, and you're able to use the information you got the year before in your next year's pursuit of a particular animal. So that's kind of how I've been doing it.
Okay, so that's your game plan when you're heading into an area like this. This is 2015 when this story begins, or 16?
Yeah, yep. 15 is when I started scouting this particular area heavy. Ran a couple cameras, but nothing crazy. I actually traveled a lot out of state that year, so I didn't spend a ton of time in the woods in New Hampshire. I don't think that particular year. I did travel. I think I had like four states, so I didn't spend a ton of time. But I had the idea that I was going to try to hunt this area in 2016. So, yeah, the first year I got a picture of this deer, and there's a couple others, was in 2016.
Okay, so take me from there.
So yeah, I got. Basically, there was a few good deer in this particular area. Of course, when I want to stress for people that aren't familiar with the type of stuff I'm hunting, I'm not talking like a 100-acre farm. I'm talking a mountain range that encompasses maybe, 10 to 20,000 acres and several miles. So I may have a picture of a deer here and then him 3 miles away, but that's kind of the same area. So it's kind of blows your mind to see how much these deer move. So anyway, in this bigger area, I was getting pictures of a few good bucks. And this deer is one of them. However, there's 2 bucks that looked a lot older and were frankly bigger that year. So I didn't hunt that deer. I don't know that I would have shot him if I got the opportunity. I may have. I wasn't sure on his age. I thought maybe he was a 4-year-old. But I didn't really target him. But I ran cameras and did learn a fair amount about him that particular year. I ended up really hunting another buck and ended up killing him. And so that year was just kind of a learning year. He was on my radar, but not right at the top, but just was aware of his presence and knew that maybe if he got older, he'd be a lot better deer and just more mature and one that I wanted to really target.
Keep it going then from there. So you kill this other buck.
Yep.
How did it progress?
So I killed this deer. It was a great buck. I think that buck was a 5-year-old buck, and he was in a little different area than where this deer was hanging out, but their ranges definitely overlapped to some degree. So, that year goes great. I start to learn more about this area and realize that there's a couple other good bucks I'm interested in there. And the next year, this deer was really, I'd say, was pretty difficult to pin down. I had maybe some pictures of him in August randomly, and then a few in October. But this deer just seemed like he was all over the place. He had a big range and he liked to travel. So I never could get an idea of exactly what he was doing. I definitely would have shot him if given the opportunity in 2017. I think he was, I'd say 5 or maybe 6 that year.
Wow.
But I was after another deer that was definitely older, in that year. So was I after him? Yeah. Was I running cameras or looking? Yeah, but I just felt like I had a better shot at this older deer. He was more consistent. So I hunted him mostly, until finally in late November, my hunting partner, Ross Roberge, and I, mostly it was his idea actually, we ran a camera on this big trail that came off this mountain and headed down into this bottom to about 1,000 acres of swampy area, more or less kind of bottomland. And we had noticed the trail several times, but it was kind of an area where you wouldn't expect a big buck to move in daylight. And it was actually Ross's idea to throw a camera up on that trail. And we threw it up and we'd check it periodically through the season, but we're going to hunt one day and we're going to go up the mountain. And we checked it, and we had the big deer I was after, old deer I was after, and this buck in daylight crossing basically an old logging road, kind of going back and forth, back, up top to the high ground and back down to the bottom. And that was kind of a really key piece of information that I realized, okay, these deer in this particular area, in particular this buck, is vulnerable on this particular area during November. So that kind of really, and I hadn't had a daylight picture of this deer ever until, not ever until that particular time period. And it was, he was moving in midday and stuff. So I was like, okay, this is good. I have a shot at this buck. So I hunted him the rest of November that year in 2017, as long as the other one I was after. Didn't see or kill either of them. I think I learned that information a little bit late to capitalize on it. So I really tried to plan to use that information in last year in 2018 hunt this deer. And so
sorry to interrupt, but you,
yep.
It sounds like, based off what I'm hearing and something that I've personally seen a lot, that these deer will often have similar tendencies year after year, and that they'll use a certain area in a generally similar way this year as they will next year. They're doing something for a reason. And then you can capitalize on that if you've got that intel from previous years, right?
Absolutely. That's really what I tried. I mean, if you're trying to, I don't get me wrong, I do run cameras and try to react to what I get on cameras, but when you're hunting areas that are relatively inaccessible, you can't just run in quick and check a couple of cameras. It's, it might take half the day or all day to do so. So a lot of the times you can't really react quick enough in the big woods to camera intel to actually capitalize on that movement. So you have to kind of bank it and then plan for it the next year. So exactly what you're saying. And, it's not 100% like if he's going to be there that day, the next year, but you can, at least you have a good game plan, and you have, it may be the fact that, it may be the case that he's doing that again. So, and this was the case for that deer. So, continued with that. And then, really last year, because I was starting to really notice him and he was kind of like real at the top of my list, I started to maybe shift a little more cameras into the areas where I got pictures of him. I started to get him a little more frequently. Got him in velvet a lot more. I got him September, October. So I had him pretty much throughout the year. I figured out basically the core area of this buck at this point. So I was feeling like I had a pretty good shot in November. But him and also that other older deer was still there again last year. So they were like my top two bucks, and I don't know which one really was the top one, but they were both there, and I was fortunate to have two really, big mature deer to hunt in the mountains. So hunted those deer last year, and I sat in that particular area where I knew they'd move in November, and I think I put like 55 hours in one tree waiting on these deer. And we got a bunch of early snow in November, and it prevented me from getting into that area. It was a situation where I had to walk, a couple miles in 12 feet of snow and, 15-degree weather, and then sit for 11 hours. It just wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
It's not practical. When you're soaked with sweat and it's, you're way back in there, it's almost a safety issue. I don't want to sound dramatic, but you can get in a situation where you're tired, you're drenched, and you're hours out from getting out of the woods. So it just wasn't, it was in a great situation. And actually the older deer actually walked by my stand on that trail the day that I couldn't get in to hunt him because of the snow. So that was a bummer. And I actually think that deer died last winter. So because he wasn't around this year. So that was kind of unfortunate. And then, a little bit later in the rut, I did get pictures of this deer that I ended up killing in that area as well. But like I said, it was just a situation where I really couldn't get in to hunt this area after, I'd say, I think it was probably November, like 20th or 19th, 20th, something like that was the day. So I've found that in this area and a lot of the big woods, the later, and in New England in particular, later November is really good. And it seems that's when the biggest deer are moving in daylight, the most frequently, covering the most ground.
And you're seeing them still in very late November. They're still kind of doing ruddy kind of things. You're still seeing them.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I actually think that I do have some data to back it up, but my belief is that our peak breeding isn't until around November 19th. So it's going to kind of shift everything back a week compared to maybe the Midwest or so. Okay. About a week, maybe less than a week, but it's later. And I think that because of just the way that the population dynamic is here and the habitat and how vast and big it is, that these deer continue to look, because it's not like they can check every doe group in their core area home range in maybe a morning or a day. They make multiple day loops. It might take them a week to check the whole mountain range or the whole swamp bottom or whatever. It's very big. So I think that they continue to check these doe groups into December. So it kind of draws the rut out a lot longer, I think. And it's just a theory, but it's tough to say for sure because we don't really have any radio collar stuff on these bucks, and there just aren't many of them. The deer densities aren't high. So it's just my opinion and my theory, I guess we could say. But yeah, I definitely see rutting activity well into November.
Okay. And so November 20th hits and you're snowed out, and that basically ended your hunt for those deer then at that point?
Yeah. Yep. That's pretty much what happened. I did get in and did some tracking because, you can track and you're still moving, you're not trying to sit still. And I did learn a little bit more about the area. That's one of the things that I like to do. I'm not a huge tracker, although we'll get to that's a big part of the story. But I do think it's an extremely valuable tool to learn about deer, especially if you can identify it that, you're following the buck that you want to hunt or one of the bucks you want to hunt.
Yeah.
You can learn in a day what might take you 2 years to learn through trail cameras or observation. So it's whenever you have like tracking snow, I think for the most part, you take the opportunity to follow it. And not only that, it's a great opportunity to actually kill that deer if you can get, the circumstances right for you.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of you guys are familiar with the old hunting tradition of eating, some organ, the heart or a chunk of liver off the first animal you kill. I had that when I was a little kid, and it was a big deal. Organ meats were always prized by frontier people who knew the importance of getting a lot of different minerals and nutrients. And as often is the case, those guys were onto something, because organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. And you can get the same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil, made exclusively from regeneratively raised, grass-fed, and finished cattle. Heart and Soil's unique freeze-drying process means all those important nutrients are trapped in, ensuring you experience every one of the benefits of nature's superfood in a clean, convenient, taste-free capsule. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And make sure to use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. That's heartandsoil.co. Use the code MeatEater. You ever get that feeling you're stuck inside staring at screens and a primal urge kicks in? You crave wide open spaces, fresh air, the chance to connect with the land? Well, maybe it's time to find your own piece of the wild, but searching for property can be a maze. That's where Land.com comes in. They got millions of listings across the country, from mountain ranches to hidden fishing holes. Their search tools are like a seasoned guide helping you narrow down what you want. Land.com isn't just about buying and selling. It's about finding a place to hunt, fish, explore, or simply sit by a campfire and listen to the crickets. So head over to Land.com today to turn one day into today, because trust me, there's nothing quite like the feeling of standing on your own piece of earth.
So I guess I'll wait until we get to the next year to learn how you use that then.
Yep. So this year, both, as far as I knew, both those deer I thought made it through the winter again. The buckeye, the original buckeye was after, I think would have been 9 or 10 this year, and this buck I think it's 7 or 8. So they were like right at the top. The older one didn't show up at all. And so after pretty much in September, I figured he had died over the winter. We had a situation last year. We had no mass crop. We had, like I said, early snow, deep snow, and extremely cold temperatures. So I really think a lot of the bucks went into last winter in really rough shape. And I think it took a toll on a bunch of them. I think a bunch died. And I actually think it affected their health even into this year. But so anyway, I believe that buck died. So really now the buck I ended up killing is kind of at the top of my list. And he's kind of the only one in the area that I'm really interested in killing. There's some other good deer, but nothing of this magnitude. You know, a 7, 8-year-old buck and a really special deer for New Hampshire. So we didn't really get many pictures of him early at all, which kind of worried me. But then he started showing up. I think we ended up checking a camera that we had left for a long time. So we actually had him in velvet, but we didn't know about it until even October. We ended up checking this camera. So he was around, but then he seemed to be around more than years prior. And he was right in the area I was hoped he would be, that set up good for a November hunt and waiting for him to, cruise that particular trail again. And I really just didn't even bother hunting him until November, just because I knew in years past he was sporadic all over the place, and no daylight really. I don't think I got a daylight picture of that buck hard horned until I think maybe I got, I'm going to say I got like 3 or 4 ever of that buck. In 4 years. So, and they were all mid-November to early December. So I knew that was the time frame it was going to happen, and I didn't figure it was worth even going in there and trying to hunt that deer until then. So I basically took November 16th through 24th or so off to hunt that deer. And my plan was to sit on that trail or that funnel, whatever you want to call it. Basically, the topography pushed these deer off this mountainous area into this bottom, this particular spot.
Can you better describe just what that topography feature was that just kind of paint that scene a little bit more?
So it's funny because it's not. It's actually a little bit difficult to describe because it's not what you'd really think. Like if I were to look at a map, I wouldn't look at that area and think, oh, that's a major pinch point or funnel. I wouldn't. It's just kind of, I think the quickest way between point A and point B really, it's basically like a point on, I guess, a mountain where the deer, I know that, so basically I think it really is driven by doe groups. So there's particular doe groups that, live high up in the mountains, and that's their range. And there's particular doe groups down in the bottom. It doesn't seem like there's a whole lot in between for the most part. So I think that basically it's the quickest point between A and B. So I don't even know that I'd call it a topography thing. Maybe that trail is there because it's kind of dumps off the mountain right there. And it's kind of a point that leads, I guess, directly to where they want to go. So this wasn't in it. This is why I told you, like, I didn't really pay much attention to the spot until we ended up throwing a camera up there and getting these pictures. Then it kind of opened my eyes and started to make a little bit of sense. But I couldn't look at a topo map or an aerial photo and say that's going to be a good spot. It wasn't like that. It was something that, we had to learn through, 2 or 3 years of experience in running cameras to identify this particular area.
Interesting.
And it's, like I said, when you're sitting there, you're like, this is kind of it doesn't feel like a spot where it's going to happen. So it was, but we had, trail camera data to back up that it was. So, so this year I took that time off. I got to that spot on, in the dark on November 16th. I pulled the card out of the camera that I had there, and he had been there a few times in that crossing already in earlier November in, after dark. But that was good. That's what he'd done in the past. And then, you get him in daylight mid to late November. So that was what I was banking on. So I climbed up the stand, got ready, and popped the card in my reader. And he had been there, walked right by that stand at 20 yards the day before at noon.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, the opportunities at these deer are few and far between. You might get an opportunity like that every year or two. So here I am at the beginning of my, rut vacation thinking, I missed the opportunity already. Like that was it. That's what I was banking on. And he did it a day early, and I miscalculated the dates because usually it was a little later in the month or even into early December. So I was, really bummed, kind of like, I don't know. I guess I'm going to hope he does it again. So I hunted him I had a death in the family. So I couldn't hunt one of the days, but I hunted, I think, 77 hours, dark to dark, so 7 11-hour days in one of 2 stands, depending on the wind, but basically hunting the same trail in the same spot, and did not see him. I passed, I think, 3 other bucks, one nice, 4-year-old that just really wasn't what I was looking for, and a Mason 3-year-old, I think, a year and a half. So wow. 77, that's a pretty good indication for people that are trying to get a feel for how it is to hunt in the big woods, is you sit in a stand for 77 straight hours during the best days of the year, and you might see 3 bucks.
Would you say that is your kind of go-to method for hunting a big wood situation like this? Like you find the right spot, and when you find that right spot, it's just a matter of hunting it over and over and over and over again because you're just waiting for that 1 or 2 deer to come through, and they might only come through once in a week or every 2 weeks. So you're not worried about overpressuring. No, and so I guess there is some consideration to take about overpressure. The thing you have to realize is in this particular area, it's not like I have does or little bucks hanging around me all day.
if I'm going to see a deer, it's going to be a cruising buck for the most part. So if I bump a year and a half, or he gets me and he's cruising, well, I don't really care because he's not going to, the buck I'm hunting could be 3 miles away.
Yeah.
So if he blows and takes off, so what? I mean, yeah, maybe I educated him for future years, but it really is not affecting the fact that that buck's going to come by. He knows that he needs to go from A to B, and when he's in this area, that's what he's going to use. So, I mean, I could be running a chainsaw or shooting a fireworks in that stand location. But that deer, like I said, he's on a different mountain. So how does he know that, that area has been pressured? Obviously, I try to leave as little scent as I can, hunt the wind and all that stuff. But I'm not really worried about that. I think that was something I had to get over because I, used to hunting some a little bit smaller stuff and in the Midwest, and I'm really worried about managing pressure. But, in the big woods, like I said, you may see 3 deer, and none of those deer got me that I saw. So really, you can kind of hunt the same area over and over again. I mean, I would definitely pay attention to the access, how you're getting in. You want to minimize the pressure, but it's not something that's like, oh, if I'm burning the spot out. It just doesn't really happen like that just because you have such low deer density, and the deer we do have are covering, miles and miles and miles. So it's a little bit different situation.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
All right.
But that is the main tactic. I think it's really, if you're not hunting them on the ground, which is kind of what, a really good way to hunt them, in the big woods or tracking, I think that's the way to do it is putting your time in that area. If you're bouncing around, there's a pretty good chance you're going to miss him.
Yeah.
When he comes by, because like I said, it may happen once a year. They're just going to walk by there in daylight.
Right.
So.
Wow. Okay. So you put in your 77 hours on stand. Yep. You saw 3 good bucks, but not the one you were after.
Right. So on the last day, I wasn't feeling it. We had sat till about noon. And I kind of noticed that a lot of the activity was usually morning till like 1 o'clock, and then the afternoons were kind of slow. And it was the last day, and I was like, I hadn't checked any cameras, I hadn't done any scouting. I've been in this tree for more or less 8 straight days, and I'm like, I got to do something. I got to figure something out. I just don't want to sit here anymore. It's the last day. And I kind of was like, well, if it didn't happen by now, it's probably not going to happen in the next 4 hours. So I decided to get down and just do a little scouting, check a few cameras. And hopefully that it would give me some information to hunt him, even later in the rut or early December. So I actually checked a camera that was about 100 yards from where I was sitting, and he had walked by that camera again on the 16th at 2 p.m.
Wow. And
I don't know how I didn't see him. He was like within 100 yards of me. It looked like his direction of travel on the camera would have led him by me, or at least beside me, but didn't see him. So here I am, like, oh, it's over. Like I had 2 opportunities kind of figured out that he was going to be right here during this time frame, and just didn't happen. So I thought it was pretty much done. I was pretty kind of bummed and like, man, so close again. So after that, I know that typically it's pretty tough because all the bucks are still like, doing rut-based activity. They're not, as I call it, in zombie mode. Zombie mode for me is when deer are just like marching around all hours of the day, through open areas, like with no regard to much of anything. But that kind of seems to end right around Thanksgiving, 25th of November. So it starts to get a little tougher. It's definitely doable, and there's still some daylight activity, but it's more focused, I think, around first thing in the morning and last light, and, around food sources, bedding areas, that type of thing, not on these big funnels. So I knew my chances went down significantly. So I figured, I had to go back to work. The next weekend, we were actually filming this whole season for a project. I actually didn't have anybody to film, so I couldn't hunt really the Thanksgiving time frame, which I was kind of bummed about. So I ended up checking a couple of cameras, and I found that he had seemed to have moved into this lower land area that we actually got him over the summer in. And it made a lot of sense because there was some good browse down there. It was not as harsh of conditions as 1,000 or 1,500 feet above that area. So less snow, a little bit warmer. There's kind of like a river that goes through there as well. So a little more favorable late season area, I guess you could say. And so that kind of was a really interesting piece of information. I was like, well, maybe he's in here. That would make a lot of sense. And so I kind of just said, well, I'm going to assume he is in here, and I'm going to make a plan to hunt it in here. So, And that was in daylight too, which was really encouraging. So it's not just one of these things where he was out moving, at night or whatever, chasing does and just happened to get a picture of him. He was actually just kind of taking his time. So that was really encouraging. Then the next day we got about 2 feet of snow.
And this is like November 29th or something like that, 23rd, somewhere in that ballpark?
Yep. And I think we got the snow on, I don't know what day it was. It must have been, I guess it was a week or so ago. And so I didn't know what that would do. I didn't know if it would kind of lock him into a particular area because he didn't want to go far. He's already been running for, at least 4 to 5 weeks. So I figured maybe he's in survival mode. He just wants to get with some does in a favorable area for, winter conditions and hang out there. I didn't know what to expect, but I hoped that he was in that area and would stick pretty tight. So that week, last week I was thinking about, just running through everything in my head. Where's this deer going to be? How can I kill him? I was so close and kind of disappointed, but still okay, I got to stay after him and kind of use anything that I can to try to get him down. And so, snow came, it was cold. It was, pretty harsh conditions. And so I kind of made a plan that, well, hey, I have this fresh snow and I could only hunt, weekends now because I'm back to work. And I said, I'm going to do whatever I can to kill this buck. So made a plan to basically sleep in on Saturday morning, which is, I think, the 7th. I say sleep in, just not get up at, 3:00 to get way back in there. I got a snow machine or snowmobile to get into this area, get me a lot closer because but it would have been another situation where I have to walk 2 to 3 miles to get there. So that was huge getting that. A buddy let me borrow that. So was able to get that figured out, get in there, into at least in the vicinity of this deer. And then the plan was to go and check these cameras. I guess I forgot to mention I had put out a few more cameras that day when I got his picture, trying to, get an idea of, okay, well, he's here. So let's, put the camera down, make the camera density a little higher in this area to try to pick him up again. So the plan was to go in there, kind of after first light, evaluate the sign we saw going in, deer tracks, see if the deer are actually, they were hanging out in this area, check some cameras, and kind of make a plan. We were going to probably sit the rest of the day if the deer was in there and it looked like there was a good sign. But we had gotten 2 inches of fresh snow on top of that. I don't know how much it was. It was somewhere between 15 inches and 2 feet of what we got. It varied based on the elevation and whatnot. But when we got that 2 inches, I was like, well, now tracking is in play because we have fresh snow. And
this is gun season now too, right?
Yeah, this is the second to last day of our rifle season. So our rifle season ended Sunday, the 8th. So it was kind of like, I'm not saying it's impossible to kill a buck with a bow in the big woods, but it gets definitely more, way more challenging without a rifle. So anyway, we snuck into this area. I was seeing a lot of tracks and a lot of sign going in there. So that was encouraging. And basically we got to one of the first cameras and I see a fresh track in front of it and check the camera and I'm going through the pictures and there's bobcats and coyotes and nothing on this camera at all the whole week. But I know this deer walked in front of him, so I'm waiting to get to this picture and he had walked by that camera at 5:30 that morning.
Wow.
So I have confirmation that it's him. He's in there, and I have his fresh track. So
that's amazing.
It was a pretty easy decision that I was going to be tracking that day and not sitting in a stand. And usually, like I said, I don't do it often, only when I have a situation like this, and it's a no-brainer. So I made, I was like, oh, we're going after him. That's, it's late in the season. We have snow. It's a golden opportunity, and if it doesn't happen today, it might not happen. And he was only on that camera that morning. He wasn't on any other cameras that I had in that area. So interesting. And that doesn't mean that he wasn't there because it's hard to, in the big woods to get him every time he comes through. But it wasn't something where I was like, oh man, this is a smoking hot spot he's hanging out in and we got to sit here. So it was kind of like a no-brainer to track this buck. So I took up the track and I mean, we can get into the details of that if you'd like. Or
Yes, I want the details on how you go about tracking a deer like that in the snow, because it's one of those things that I've always been intrigued by. I have never tried to do it. I've never had a big enough area and picked up a big track in the same time to be able to pull it off. So walk me through your mindset. Walk me through what you were looking for. When you were going fast, when you were slowing down.
Yep.
What was the plan?
So I'll start by saying this. I am not a very experienced tracker. I'd say that, I have probably more experience than maybe you, because you haven't ever done it. I've tracked deer in the past. Don't get me wrong. I grew up in, this area, so we have snow early and, lots of ground to chase on. But it's not something that I count on, because you don't always have tracking snow. So it's not like I'm banging on snow, and if we don't get it, then I'm, out of luck. So, but I've used it, when appropriate, and this is one of those times. And if you want to talk about like the tactics and the intricacies of tracking, you talk to the Benoits or Hal Blood or one of those guys.
Yeah.
Obviously those are the experts on it, but I know enough to be dangerous, I guess you could say. So I guess the funny thing is right next to that camera, about 15 yards away, he had actually bedded down right after he walked by that camera.
Wow.
And so I found his fresh bed, and I actually thought we bumped him out of it when we got there, because he was running. And I'm like, man, how could we have known? I mean, I was kind of bummed, because I'm like, man, we could have snuck up on him, but like, how do you know that he's bedded right next to your camera? How do you know that, you just don't know.
Yeah.
So I was kind of like, man, did I just miss another opportunity to kill this buck? Like, I'm like, well, we have his track. It's like, 8:30 in the morning at this point, we have all day. Let's just give it our best shot. And usually ideal tracking snow is something like, 4 to 6 inches of fresh stuff where you can really make out defined tracks. It's not, I guess, hindering your ability to cover ground, because we had so much snow that it was a challenge to even get around. It was we were at the point where it was like considering snowshoes. So it was a challenge. And when you get that much snow, you really can't see, for the most part, the track you're following. You can't identify it. It's really tough to make it out. It just looks like, I don't know, like you were sticking a ski pole and 2 feet of powder and pull it out. There's nothing defined. You're like, what am I looking at here? So then you start to look at, the width, the stride length, the behavior of the deer, that type of thing. So I knew this buck was running, but then I started to see other deer tracks, and I thought to myself, man, did he chase off a small buck? Is he chasing does stuff? I wasn't sure. We followed him probably a mile, not really knowing if he was way ahead of us, if he was, we were right behind him, if he was chasing does, if I bumped him, trying to figure it out. It's just tough in that, that deep snow to really know what's going on. And finally, after, I don't know, must have been an hour and a half, an hour, and about a mile tracking him, I just decided this buck's chasing does. And there's no way that we bumped him and continued to bump him. He's chasing does, which was kind of crazy to me, because it's probably 10 degrees. It's December 7th. He's been running for 6 weeks, and there's 2 feet of snow. Like, it doesn't seem like a smart move, I guess, to be running that hard to me in those conditions for a mature buck. Like, this guy's going to run himself to death if he keeps this up, I'm thinking. So anyway, we had a hell of a time determining that he was still in this group. I think he was chasing about 3 does, or, a mature doe and 2 fawns. Tough to tell. We followed him for a while, and in the does, and finally they had slowed down and went up on this kind of the spine on a ridge. And I figured, okay, then they might be here. We need to really slow down. For the most part, we were going at a moderate pace, I'd say, just because I wasn't sure if, it's like, do we need to stop and let this deer calm down because you jumped him and go back about his normal activities? Or do we need to make up distance because this buck's running does and he's 2 miles away? It's stuff.
Right.
We're trying to make that determination. And so they slowed down, and so we slowed down. But they didn't slow down for like a very long period of time. It was a short distance. But anyway, unfortunately, the one was really bad for our approach on this ridge, and we definitely wind bumped them. We got to the top of the ridge. We saw where they had stopped and browsed. And then there was running tracks going off like the back of the ridge and off this like drop off and down again into another different like bottom area. And so we took some time and kind of like used that, more, I guess, relaxed track, the sprinting track, to see what's going on. And we figured, okay, there's probably like 2 or 3 does. And then like we saw where he had kind of stopped with him, but just maybe 40, 50 yards away and was browsing, and we saw tine marks in the snow. So I'm like, okay, good. We're still on him. It's not a different buck, because he was the only buck I was going to shoot. So it'd be a real bummer if we tracked this buck all over the country for the whole day and walk up and it's, some 2-year-old. It's like, oh man, especially since we couldn't make out the track. And he didn't really have a giant hoof print either that would have, that you looked at and you said, man, that's a giant deer. It was like, I think that's a pretty good track, but, tough to say. So we followed him, and he ran with the does for maybe a half a mile, and then he finally split off from them. And then that kind of was encouraging. And I think we may have pushed him a couple more times in that period. It was tough to say. But we basically got to a spot where we're like, okay, he is definitely separated from the does, and now he's starting to head back up into the high ground, up, into the mountains a little more. And I just figured, okay, this is a good time to stop, let him cool down, think that he lost us, and kind of go up high and start to do his thing. And I think that a lot of these bucks like to bed up high during the day and come down and look for does. Well, they'll of course look for does up high as well, but they'll come down and look for does in the bottom, I think, at night, and they'll be in the bottom at night and then kind of make their way back up to bed, at some point in the morning. So this made a lot of sense. And I was like, okay, this is encouraging. So we gave him about, 30 to 40 minutes, and it was extremely difficult to sit there and wait, because I knew we had his track and he was right there. And I knew, we couldn't wait that long, because this is about noon, maybe 12:30, and we don't have that much more light left. I know midday, what are you talking about? You have the whole rest of the afternoon, but we still might have to track this buck for 4 miles.
Right.
So it's really not that much time. And we were starting to get cold, because we're drenched in sweat from running this deer through, 2 feet of snow. So anyway, we finally got back on his track. He started to climb. He slowed down. It was very encouraging. He got into some older, or I guess not as fresh doe tracks, probably made the night before during that 2 inches of snow. And so, and he wasn't running them. He was just kind of following them, I think, trying to figure out what they were doing. And actually, we lost his track because I figured that we needed to slow down and just keep our eyes above. And we're just kind of keeping our eyes on the deer tracks, and we're following, 3 or 4 sets, scanning. And we finally got to a point where we were looking at the tracks. We're, following. We're like, his track's not here. These aren't super fresh. And so that was like, oh man, what happened? Did we lose more time? Like, did we lose him? So I ended up backtracking probably 300 yards and found where he had split off, and he actually headed up again, even higher. And so we headed up higher after him, and we got to an area that was like mature softwoods, like conifers, spruce and hemlock, and it looked like a likely area for him to bed. But his track didn't indicate that he was about to bed. So a lot of times before these bucks will bed, they'll mill around. They're not, going from A to B on a straight line. They slow down, they're browsing, and they're taking their time. But this buck just seemed to be going. So I kind of was like, I don't know if he's about to bed or he is, and I wasn't sure, but we snuck up anyway. We got to really this little plateau on the side of the mountain, and sure enough, there's just a super fresh bed with a bunch of sign around it and his track in it. And I'm like, oh man, we must have bumped him. Like, I'm disappointed again. Like, how didn't we see him?
This is an emotional roller coaster.
Scanning, but yeah, I really didn't have any idea how the day was going to end. And then I look up out of the bed, and there's another, it starts to climb again, and I see running tracks. I'm like, yeah, we bumped them. I'm like, it's 2:00 now, 2:15. We have like 2 hours of light left. Gets, dark pretty early on the East Coast. So I'm like, oh, that's might be it, but we'll continue after him. Well, we only went about 20 more yards, and I realized he must have just bounded up that embankment to get up it quicker, that little steep section, because he started walking again. And we could see his walking tracks for another 30, 40 yards. I was like, no, we didn't bump him. I'm like, he's got to be right here. He just probably decided to position beds based on the wind, or maybe browse around a little bit, whatever it was. And he was heading up to like kind of a ridge point, I guess, on the mountain, basically a ridge point. So at that point, I was really feeling like he's right here. Like, I think we have a really good shot. So we really took our time. We climbed maybe another 100 yards extremely slowly. We got to the top. His tracks kind of went out to this point kind of to my right. So I was scanning that direction. And then all of a sudden, basically to our left, he had kind of made a loop. He was just standing there about 70 yards out, kind of in the hemlocks. And we had not very long to shoot. So I just basically pulled up on him, shot, and I kind of recoil on my rifle kind of got me off him. I couldn't see, and I just kind of disappeared. And I saw like a flash of brown, maybe 10 yards to the right from where we were standing. And I kind of tried to clear some trees to see and maybe get another shot, but couldn't see much of anything. And then I saw kind of like, anybody that's watched a deer tip over has seen it. It's kind of like a slow, like, you know, almost like a windmill action of like falling down. And of course it's through hemlocks, and I don't know if for sure. And I'm of course doubting everything that I do, thinking worst case, but I'm like, I think he just went down. So anyway, pretty exciting, and still didn't know exactly. I mean, 99% sure it's him, right? But I didn't have time to like identify that it actually was that buck.
Yeah.
And you see a little bit of antler and a big body, and you're like, well, it's got to be him. So, I wasn't sure if he went down either. So, we're sneaking up, and there's a lot of big boulders in this area, glacial deposited boulders. They're like, car to house size. So it's really neat up in that area. I kind of came around one of them, and I looked ahead about 40 yards, and I just see, his right side sticking up out of the snow. And there was no doubt it was him. So it was a pretty emotional moment for me, actually. It was just a lot of, years of all that coming together. And it's the first mature buck that I've ever killed tracking. It's the first mature buck I've killed in New Hampshire in December. It's actually the first mature buck I've ever killed with a rifle as well. So it was kind of a really cool moment, and maybe my oldest buck, depending on how old he ends up being. And I think maybe my biggest buck as well, as far as antlers go. So really a wild journey and an awesome, I think, experience. And it just was a really neat, lots of depth, I guess, to the story.
Oh, yeah. Now, a lot of you guys are familiar with the old hunting tradition of eating, some organ, the heart or a chunk of liver off the first animal you kill. I had that when I was a little kid, and it was a big deal. Organ meats were always prized by frontier people who knew the importance of getting a lot of different minerals and nutrients. And as often is the case, those guys were onto something, because organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. And you can get the same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil, made exclusively from regeneratively raised, grass-fed, and finished cattle. Heart and Soil's unique freeze-drying process means all those important nutrients are trapped in, ensuring you experience every one of the benefits of nature's superfood in a clean, convenient, taste-free capsule. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And make sure to use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. That's heartandsoil.co. Use the code MeatEater. You ever get that feeling you're stuck inside staring at screens and a primal urge kicks in? You crave wide open spaces, fresh air, the chance to connect with the land? Well, maybe it's time to find your own piece of the wild. But searching for property can be a maze. That's where Land.com comes in. They got millions of listings across the country, from mountain ranches to hidden fishing holes. Their search tools are like a seasoned guide helping you narrow down what you want. Land.com isn't just about buying and selling. It's about finding a place to hunt, fish, explore, or simply sit by a campfire and listen to the crickets. So head over to Land.com today to turn one day into today, because trust me, there's nothing quite like the feeling of standing on your own piece of earth.
So if you had to drill down to why this worked out, if you had to point to, all right, I think it was because of A and B that really led to me killing this deer, what would those things be? I've got like two thoughts in my mind of what I think might have been the high level keys to success. But in your mind, what do you think?
So I think obviously I tracked this deer and killed him with tracking. Without tracking snow, I wouldn't have killed him on that day, I don't think. But I think that the reason I was able to find his track and identify that it was him just is because of historical data and running cameras and getting to know kind of what he does over the years. So that was a huge key, because like I said, I was after that buck and that buck only. So if I had seen his track without that picture, maybe I would have followed it. I don't think I would have followed it for, I think it ended up being 4 miles in 5.5 hours. I think we probably would have given up, especially since it was a challenging track because of, how many times he was running with does in the deep snow. I'm almost certain I would have given up, to be honest with you, because I I wouldn't have known it was him, and my confidence level wouldn't have been there. I kind of would have been like, I think we're wasting our time here. Not to mention we're absolutely exhausted from climbing mountains and 2 feet of snow and 10-degree weather. So
Yeah.
I think that's a huge key, is just being familiar with his patterns, different times of the year, running cameras and getting that track. And then the next thing is obviously just getting a golden opportunity and like capitalizing on it, like recognizing that this is a gift here, having his track, being able to identify him, and having fresh tracking snow. So really that's kind of the two things I think that were the biggest, the opportunity, recognizing it, getting that right condition, and then, the knowledge and I guess back work and that, allowed me to get that picture to know that it's him.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's so, your scenario was pretty unique compared to maybe what a lot of other guys or girls are dealing with, in that you're up in the mountains, you were in the big woods, big public land, or whatever it was. That, it might be unique compared to what I'm dealing with here in southern Michigan. But the basic concepts of what you did were kind of right in line with what, I might recommend someone do here on, in Michigan, which would be, in the late season in December, you want to gather intel or use intel from previous years to know the general region you should be looking, and then be hyper-focused on what you can learn until the conditions or intel tell you now is the right time to strike. And so for you, it was you were gathering intel over years, you hyper-focused on the smaller area, you went in there with that fresh snow because that seemed to be a good opportunity, and then when you saw the track in the picture, you said, oh, now is the strike. Right now we have to go for it. And lo and behold, it panned out. Now, with that being the case, in that unique situation, what else goes through your mind when you're hunting December 9th or December 19th or, late season in a different kind of scenario? Because I know you have hunted all across the country. What are some other things you're thinking about if you were trying to kill a late season buck somewhere else that wasn't in the mountains or wasn't on this huge scale of land?
I think this is nothing like, once again, that everybody hasn't probably heard 100 times, but I think really late season, there's, I'd say 3 factors. Well, 4, if you will. I guess the 4th one's not, I guess, a little bit different than a different category than the first 3. But I think one is a area that hasn't been pressured. So you want to find areas that there hasn't been a lot of gun pressure, or maybe sanctuaries where there's no hunting, whatever, where deer feel comfortable still moving in daylight. You want to find food, 100%. Even late in the rut, I think food's a big deal. If it's not for the bucks that are looking for does late rut, it's a big deal for the does because winter's coming. I guess the last one would be does, and some of the late does coming in. I've seen actually surprisingly good second rut and maybe even late first rut activity into December across the country, not just in the Northeast. So if you can find areas, low pressures, a lot of does and a high quality food source, you're going to be, I'd say that's your best bet, better than any other thing. Yeah. But even with those things, late season can be really challenging, and it can be discouraging as well. And I haven't had a ton of success late season. I think unless you have a really big, food source with, almost no pressure the whole year, and you get some really dramatic weather conditions, it's tough. But those are the things I look for. And then the last thing, of course, is weather. That would be, I guess, you call it the 4th factor is you want to watch the weather. The more severe, the better. Whatever's pushing these deer to eat. And that's actually one of the things that surprised me about this buck is the weather was pretty severe. I mean, we're talking single digits to teens, 2 feet of snow, November or December 7th, after this buck's been running for 6 weeks, and he's still chasing does like a maniac. And to me, that was like, I don't know that this buck wouldn't have run himself to death. Like, he was skin and bones when I walked up on him. He was like nothing left of him. So I don't know that he maybe wouldn't have made that transition to food, in the next week. Or I don't know, maybe there was a hot doe that day or a fawn that came in. It's tough to say. I don't know what the circumstance was, but
right.
So yeah, those are really what I look for.
How consistently
doesn't matter where I am.
Yeah, how consistently do you see that second rut? Is that a thing you count on every year, or is it a little more touch and go?
It's what I would I kind of approach is I look for all the other factors, and then maybe that's a little wild card sprinkled in that might get a buck that you haven't seen in daylight moving.
Yeah.
So like I wouldn't bank on it. I don't hunt it like the rut. I hunt it like a late season hunt, and then hope that maybe that fawn or that late doe brings a pile of bucks. And I actually had that happen in Ohio a couple of years back. I was just hunting a food source and seeing a lot of deer. And then all of a sudden it was like all hell broke loose. And, there's like 3 mature bucks that came in on, I think I don't know because it happened so fast. And I assume it was a fawn. It was mid-December. But, that's just kind of the wild card that can also stack your odds in the favor. And that's actually kind of why I like mid-December for late season hunting, because you have that stacked in your favor as well. Early December can be good, or late December or January, but I feel like that, right around December 15th, especially in the Midwest, can be a really good time because you have kind of all those factors in your favor.
Right.
So it's like probably maybe one of my, other than maybe like opening week and the peak of the rut, it's probably like my third favorite period to hunt.
Now, one of the tricks with hunting that time of year, like you said, food's really important, but sometimes picking the right food or the right place on the food can be the detail that makes the difference between, seeing a buck and shooting the buck, or, seeing it at all. What are some of the top food sources you would key in on in the late season? Or secondarily, my question would be, how do you pick the right food source? Maybe they're in an area where there's multiple food sources around. How do you go about trying to fine tune, the right place to be on December 15th when there's multiple options?
Yeah, that's a tricky one, because I think that is so dependent on your particular area and what you got going on. Sometimes, it's beans, it's corn. Sometimes I've seen clover. Like right now, I have a property that I manage in New Hampshire, and I have standing beans and corn, and we have snow and cold, and they're on clover. Don't know why. Digging through 2 feet of snow to get clover. That's where the activity's at. I wouldn't have ever predicted that. And if you don't have any of that type of thing, which most of our area doesn't, in maybe some of the lower elevations, white and red oaks, that's a really safe bet. South-facing stuff. But a lot of the areas that I'm hunting, when you get higher in the mountains, I guess the oaks aren't as prevalent. So you're looking for browse, and even stuff like I was kind of mentioned those boulders that are in this area. They grow a lot of ferns and moss on them, and I've seen a lot of activity late in the season on that, even like eating moss and ferns off the side of the boulders. Like that seems to be a bit of a drawing card. But I would say that, regardless of what the actual food source is, what you need to do is figure out in your area at that time what's going on. So I think really using all your clues. If you can glass or see anything, do that. Like get out and watch, see what the majority of the activity is at before you make a plan to hunt. If you can't glass, which is most of New England, the big woods, if you got snow, look for tracks in snow. That's you can learn so much by doing that. Run cameras, see what the highest density of deer is. The other thing that I think is interesting for late season is I don't seem to get regular pictures of bucks. Seems like I just don't think they're moving as much, maybe. And when they do move, it's more A to B, and they may just not be walking by the camera. But it seems like I'll get like just the frequency of that deer on the cameras drops off dramatically late season. But I still think he's still in that area. So I don't know. I've thought about that a lot. Not sure exactly why that is. But so I wouldn't be discouraged if like the deer isn't there all the time. Yeah. He still might be in there, just maybe not moving as much and walking around, checking scrapes,
right.
Curious about everything. So
they've been hunted for a while, and both are trying to avoid hunters and probably conserve energy as the winter approaches too. So that makes a lot of sense. You brought up a good point though about not getting discouraged. Once you get into December, or in states where you can hunt in January too, you've been going at it for a long time. And if you're still out there, it might be because you haven't filled the tag yet. There's going to be some mental burnout probably going on. How would you recommend folks just kind of push through that? Or how have you ever tried to? I mean, I got to believe even in your situation, you had this huge rut push, and then it gets to it's almost mid-December, and you still haven't killed them, and you were probably feeling some of that too.
Yeah, no, I mean, for sure. I was talking to my buddies, the whole year about this deer, and after the rut, they're like, "You gonna get him?" And I'm just like, "Man, probably not." I mean, I'm gonna try, but like, my chances aren't great. I was like, honestly, like, he's probably either gonna make it another year, hopefully, or maybe die this winter type deal. But yeah, it's super discouraging, and I mean, for the most part, your chances may be as low as it's been all year. So yeah, you just have to. But what can you control? You can't control that. You're in that situation. So stay positive. Just do everything you can. Be persistent and hope that, something goes your way. That's all you can do. It's deer hunting. And, if it doesn't go your way, then it doesn't. And you get a tag. And it's not the end of the world. There's always next year. And I think most of us aren't doing this because we're going to starve to get death over the winter if we don't get a deer, So, I mean, it's sometimes that's the name of the game, I guess. Sometimes you don't fill that tag, and that's okay. That doesn't. I mean, I haven't filled one in the last 2 years, and I've put a bunch of time in. So I mean, it's just the way that it is. And I think if you stay positive and take that outlook that, hey, I'll just if I don't get them this year, I'll just pick right up on them next year, and use what I learned this year to get after them. But you got to realize all it takes is one dramatic weather event to get that deer to move in daylight, and he walks out when you haven't seen him all year, or you haven't had a chance in him all year, and there he is. He's dead. Or like I said, one fawn that comes in and he comes flying off a ridge and out of nowhere, and you just killed the buck after all year. And 5 minutes before, you're like, yeah, there's like no shot I'm killing this deer. You're feeling down on yourself. So I would just keep that in mind. I mean, there's not really much you can do. So I just say you think about it, have a solid plan, stay positive, and that's all you can do. And just be kind of proud and satisfied that you fought the good fight and maybe it didn't hurt, but that's hunting, it doesn't always go your way. Sometimes we get this idea in our heads or this image from what we see, in some of the really good places that guys are hunting, that, it's just, everybody kills a big buck every year. And it's just not the case. It's not the reality for most people, even the guys that put in a ton of time. So, I mean, and really, I don't think it should be about that. It should be about the journey. And I was talking to my buddy when we were tracking, and I said, hey, it's not going to be the end of the world if we don't kill this deer today. Like, I hope that if we don't, that he makes another year and I get to the story continues. And I really am fascinated by, the journey or the story and the progression of these deer over the years and learning about them. I think that, without a 4-year story, this deer, I mean, he's a big deer, but without a 4-year story, he wouldn't mean, anywhere close to what he means to me now. So, it's just kind of how it is. And that's how the approach I took the last 2 years, because I was after, him and another one, and it just didn't happen. So I was like, well, next year, I can't wait for next year. So I would just stay optimistic and look to the future. And if it happens, it happens.
Yeah, enjoying that journey. That's one of the things when it gets to the late season for me. I always have this slight shift in mindset, and maybe this isn't good when I describe what I'm like before. But when I'm in November, I'm usually a little bit stressed out because there's all this expectation. Like, this is when it's supposed to happen. This is the best chance all year. This is the Super Bowl. The stakes are highest. Right. Your opportunity is now. And if it doesn't happen now, it might not happen again at all. So I tend to find myself really excited, but also stressed a little bit during that time period, which is just kind of my nature. Once I get into December, though, I've had to have like a mental switch where I shift from, okay, now it might not happen, right? I mean, things are getting harder and harder. More and more of these deer have been killed during gun season. My opportunities are less. That doesn't mean it can't still come together, but I have this little shift where I go from stressing because I have to get it done to now, it might not happen, but that's okay. And looking back on this season. And so when I'm on these late season hunts, I've come to really enjoy this time of year because it's all gravy now. Now I've kind of said, all right, you've had a season, you've had all these great times, these cool encounters, you've learned new things. Just enjoy it. Just milk it for what it is, because the season's going to be done here in a matter of days or weeks, and you're going to wish that it was hunting season again. So I tend to find myself doing a better job of looking up at the sky and the sun setting, or paying attention to the little fawn running around and just enjoying that. And yeah, I'm still going to have a smart plan. Yeah, I'm still going to be trying to get that deer. But like you said, whether it happens or not, life's still pretty darn good.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with what you just said there. I think late season is a great time for reflection and just appreciating the journey you had. Whether you kill a deer or not, like everybody, like I said, it does it for a different reason. But if you're out there just because you want to kill an animal and notch a tag, like, I don't know, that's fine. But you may want to take a step back and think about why you're doing it. I really just love spending time outside, pursuing these animals, thinking, I like this journey. That's what I like. And at the end of the year, you can look back and be like, man, look at the season I had. Maybe I didn't kill this buck, but look what I learned. Look at the encounters I had. Like, that was fun. I got to spend time outdoors. I got to do what I love. And hey, I learned this year, and I'm going to work hard in the off season and put this into play. And next year, I think that's going to put me over the top, and it's going to, put the odds in my favor. And then you have that anticipation starts to build again, and just do it all over again. So I think that's what I like the best about this whole gig. And if you kill a deer, awesome. But there's also the thing, I killed this buck, and he's not there anymore though. Yeah. So next year I don't get to look forward to what's he going to be, what's he going to look like.
Yeah, it's a little sad.
Smaller, what's he doing? Yeah, so he's not there anymore, and that's kind of a letdown too. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. Sometimes I'm not upset that these deer get away and they make it to another year, Yeah. So I don't know, if you're getting stressed, like, just try to maybe take that perspective or mindset and think about it that way, and it may help you enjoy your time more and enjoy the process and the journey.
Yeah, that's what it's all about right there. Gotta make sure to never get so serious or ever get so worked up about it that it takes the joy out of it.
Right.
So, man, well, this is fun, and it's encouraging to hear your story because, there's probably a lot of other people, myself included, still trying not to tag, and to hear how you pulled it off after years and years of following the steer around and it all came together. I think that can give us all a little bit of hope that maybe the stars can align for us too. So thank you for sharing that, Brett, and sharing the process that you went through and what led to this success. It was really interesting, and holy smokes, if you guys haven't seen this deer that Brett got a shot at, you got to check it out over on Instagram, or where Brett should folks go if they want to see what you're up to now or the different projects you've got coming in the future. Is there any place you want to direct people towards?
Right now, if they just go to my Instagram, they'll see that, and then whatever projects that I got coming out, I got a few things we're working on that should be coming out this coming summer, including the story of this buck. But my Instagram is just BrettJoy22, so BRETTJOI22. You can check me out there, and I don't post like crazy, but I do post occasionally and keep people up there and what I'm up to.
Perfect. All right. Well, I'll make sure to share that with folks. And man, thank you for taking the time to share all this with us. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. And like I said, there's a lot of season left for a lot of guys, and stay positive and enjoy your time out there.
Fingers crossed. I'll have a good story for you soon, Brett.
I hope so. Good luck.
Thank you. And that is going to do it. Another episode in the books. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this one. I hope it gave you just a little bit more hope for those late season hunts. Keep after it. Good things can still happen. I will hopefully have news for you soon with my own late season hunts. I will tell you though, as late season hunting starts wrapping up, reading season begins for me. I'm out there grabbing some new books. I love a good book by the fire when it's cold outside. And I'd be remiss if I didn't remind you that Wild Country, my new book, is out there. It's for sale on Amazon or wherever else you want to find books. And it would mean the world to me if you pick up a copy. Thanks in advance. And until next week, thank you for listening and stay wired to hunt.
I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase.
As you know, the Meat Eater live tour is on April 23rd through May 5th. Chances are in a town near you. what you may not know is you can win tickets to each of these events just by going to a backcountry hunters and anglers pint night. There's going to be a pint night in each of these towns: San Diego, Salt Lake City, Tempe, Anaheim, Boise, Sacramento, Missoula, Portland, Tacoma, where you can compete in meat eater trivia and win not only tickets to the show, but a chance to be on stage with all of us. So get your butt to a pint night, and we'll see you on stage.